Hello everybody. In today's challenge video for Wingspan, I'm going to try and win without playing any birds in my grassland. Now, in my opinion, the grassland is the most important region to play birds in because it allows you to play eggs in the late game once you've played a lot of birds, and that's a reliable way to get points and a reliable way to get end of round goals. Now, because I think it's so important, I think it's also a good idea to showcase other birds that have alternative ways of getting points, such as birds that tuck and birds that cache food. So I'm going to try and use these birds that I pick up in my starting hand to only play in the wetland and the forest, because if I do not play anything in the grasslands, I will need to have those two filled up at least. In my starting hand, I do start with the chipping sparrow. The chipping sparrow is pretty much essential to this strategy or any other bird that lays eggs on its own. And the chipping sparrow is very good because I can lay an egg on any bird, which means that I can probably use it to get some end of round goals, and you'll see me do that towards the end as well. So here I'm actually deciding, do I want to pick up 3 birds at the start or 4? It's very rare for me to pick up 4 birds, but all of them are very good for this strategy. The blue jay is good because it gets a free cache, and that's a point every time I grab food. The sparrow is good because it gives me an egg. The warbler is a juicer that can go in the wetland as well. And the barred owl is also a very reliable way to tuck cards, and it will be a very important point generation tool at the end of the game as well and throughout the entire game. So I'm really just deciding if I want to pick up the warbler now and just hold on to it until I can play the juicer, or if I want to start with 3 and have more food after I pick up the common grackle in the tray. I do decide to pick up 4 because I noticed that the chipping sparrow only takes 1 food, and that's the first card I'm going to play. And I'm going to have to use it to lay eggs anyway. So in order to use it, I'm going to need to get food. So if I'm getting food every time I lay an egg, then I might as well just start with as many cards that I want to play as possible and move on from there. So I do also decide to pick up the falcon or bonus card that gives me 2 points every time I play a bird with predator power, and predators are going to be very important in this because that's my main method of tucking cards in the forest. A lot of point generators in the forest are based around hunting, like the owls and the falcons and the eagles, which I will play in the wetland later. On my first turn, I pick up the common grackle, not anything too complicated. The common grackle will be a very good anchor once I figure out how to get some card sustain. I'm not going to play the grackle until the mid game or maybe even the middle late game, just because all the cards in my hand I want to play eventually, so I don't want to be tucking in order to get eggs and tucking a card that I could use later, even if it does give me points. So right now I am deciding which my next card is going to be. So I decided I'm going to play the barred owl next because it's the only card left that only requires 1 food, and it will also generate points for me every time I grab food in the future. So playing it earlier will just get me more points. Over time, I'm also checking the tray pretty much every turn to make sure there's no other really good cards that I want to pick up that can be played easily. It looks like all the cards in the tray are movers, the birds that if they're to the right, they can move into another region. And I don't think they're very important to me in this challenge because I can only move the birds into 2 different regions. And I would rather play birds that directly give me points instead. Here, I'm going to grab enough food to play the blue jay next. Like I said, I could play the grackle, but I do not have enough cards in my hand or a way to get cards in my hand, so I don't want to rely on tucking just yet. Unfortunately, the barred owl fails its cache, so I'm not going to be able to get food or get a tuck this turn, but that's okay. It's a little bit inconsistent, but it's much better than a lot of other cards that I could be playing right now. As long as that it has the potential of giving me a point, that's really all that matters. I should also mention the first round goal being birds in the grasslands in the first round is pretty unfortunate for me, but if there's ever going to be a round goal that I cannot get, it's good to be the first one, because if it's the first one, it's not going to be worth nearly as many points And I believe I do pick up all of the round goals except for that first one. So that will give me a lot of points later. And I'm sort of sacrificing the ability to get that first round goal for all of the other ones, such as getting nests or getting eggs in the wetland. I will also say in this challenge, it's possible for me to lay eggs. I'm allowed to use the lay eggs action, but I'm not allowed to play birds in the grassland. That's the only stipulation. The blue jay is kind of complicated for me right now because, you know, having food early is important, but I also feel like I'm not going to be starving this game. So do I want to take a seed or do I want to cache a seed? I decide here to cache it. The tuck was successful, so my barred owl gets a point, and the chipping sparrow will be able to lay an egg, and I will need those to play later. I do technically have enough food to play my prothonotary warbler, and I do decide to play the bird just because I would like to start filling up my wetland in order to grab some more cards. The common grackle is going to get me a lot of points in the future, and I want to make him as active as possible. Here, the enemy starts giving me some juice. I got to draw a card from the enemy duck, and that gave me a swan, a trumpeter swan, which is worth a lot of points and can go into the wetland later once I get more food. This will be it for the first round. I will not have any more plays in this first round, and we can now start round 2. 7 more turns, and we get to draw one more time from the opponent's canvas back, and I get a golden eagle, and the golden eagle is pretty good as well. I can play it in the wetland for a couple of mouse or rodent food, as it's technically called. I can play it for a couple of rodent food, which will not be very hard to get, and playing the golden eagle will also generate points pretty much every time I use the wetland. It's possible that I draw a card that has more than 100 centimeter wingspan, but that's pretty rare in this game. I think like only 30% of cards, or maybe even 20%, have more than 100 centimeters. So it's a lot more reliable than the owl is in my forest. Here I'm actually trying to decide if I want to play my common grackle now in the wetland, but I decide that I'm going to hang on to it until I can play it reliably in the forest, because I think my main win condition is going to be just going through my forest and having every single one of my cards be a point generator. So my blue jay is going to cache a card, my owl is going to tuck a card, the chipping sparrow is going to lay eggs, and the grackle is going to tuck and lay an egg. So I'm just kind of waiting for a good opportunity to play the grackle in the forest. Until then, I will be grabbing some mouse and rodent food so that I can play the golden eagle as quick as possible. That'll give me a couple more chances to get more cards, and getting more cards means I can play my grackle finally. Being able to lay more eggs is important. Now I can have a little bit more opportunities to play the birds after the first one. So I believe next turn I'm going to grab food again so that I can get more rodents. And I do find one, so that's good. Now I'll have 3 rodents to play on my golden eagle, and we can go through and grab all the other points in my forest. Playing get food power is pretty much always a good thing for me because it's going to generate 3 points. And doing that in just round 2, having that system out in just round 2 is pretty good. Of course, like, the egg points are going to go away as I play cards, but it's still a point technically. Luckily, the enemy is going to give us some bird feeder power with the hummingbird, so thank you to the enemy AIs. And this turn, finally, the golden eagle comes out. I'm able to discard an egg, and the golden eagle will now give me a couple of points, hopefully whenever I grab cards. And it also lets me grab 2 cards now that it's played without spending an egg, and I am one step closer to playing my common grackle and finally rounding out my forest. On the next turn, I'm going to grab a couple of cards that I think I can play, the nuthatch and the brant. The brant's, pretty good. It'll just be a card that I can play in the wetlands. It's not that important. My wetland is not my moneymaker, so, I'm not really worried about playing a, quote, useless card in there. It'll expand my wetland's power, and it'll also give me a lot more cards that are useless to me that I can use to tuck in my grackle. Right now, I see that there is a repeater. There is the catbird that is in the tray, And I think that is going to be the final bird I play in the forest in order to grab more points. It's not going to be a problem resource-wise to play it. It's worth 5 points. And, of course, it is going to be able to repeat a power like the Grackle or the Egg Layer in order to get eggs where I need it, or in order to tuck more cards. So having the repeater is very good in the system of the forest, where that's where I generate my points. I can just copy whatever point generator is useful to me at the time and just go from there. Here I'm just checking my cards and see which of the foods I want to get from the bird feeder. I'm pretty much set for the birds that I want to play in the next couple of turns, but I decided to get a worm because worms are very common in the cards in my hand. Here I go to play my common Grackle, but unfortunately I don't have enough eggs. I forgot that I don't have enough eggs. So I am instead just going to grab some food, see what kind of food I need, and grab those. I decided to grab a worm and a seed. Then there's still a seed in the bird feeder, so I can cache it. Gonna look at it from my deck and lay one more egg so I can finally play the Grackle. That will of course be next turn though. I just barely miss the end of round goal here. If I were to get that end of round goal and at least tie for it, this may have been a couple points higher in at the end of the game, but that's okay. As long as I can fill out these last two, that's where a lot of my points are going to come from. Finally, the common Grackle comes out, and since the common Grackle lays an egg, I should be able to next turn simply grab some food and lay 2 eggs, and those 2 eggs will be able to be spent in order to play my catbird, so that I can repeat powers. Right now, I'm trying to decide if I want to just go ahead and fill out my forest, or if I want to go towards filling out my wetland. Either looking through and seeing which kind of foods I need, I decided to get a fish and a mouse. Now finally is time to play the gray catbird, and that will be the 5th and final card that goes in my forest. It's going to be especially important, and I thought honestly that I was just going to be using its power to, you know, go through the Grackle every time, but actually it ended up being more important to copy the chipping sparrow, because it let me play more eggs where I needed them to be. As you can see, I need to play eggs in any branch nests right now to get this end of round goal. So I decide to sometimes play eggs in the branches, but you know, considering I only have 1 branch right now, it's not really that important to me. Unfortunately, I'm not going to get this end of round goal either, the birds with branch nests with eggs in them. So instead, I'm just going to grab some food. I'm going to choose my Grackle so I can tuck more cards from my hand. Pretty much any card that has forest only power is completely useless to me because I can't play anything else in my forest. See if I get a tuck. I do not. The black vulture, unfortunate. And I decided to lay an egg on the branch nest so that I finally can get at least something towards the end of round goal. Maybe I'll get 1 point, maybe I'll get 0, who knows. Here I decide, since I don't really have anything else for me to do right now for the end of round goal, I'm going to use these next 2 turns to play a couple cards in my wetland. So this is a sort of point generating card. I will get a couple more eggs by playing that this way. I go ahead and grab a wheat from the enemy hummingbird, and when it's my turn, I do not have enough eggs to play my trumpeter swan for the final bird in my wetlands. So I decide to just grab a couple of cards. All 3 of those cards are going to be tuckers, which means I'm going to tuck it behind the bird, and that'll give me a couple points and a couple eggs to start playing some more birds later. And as you can see, I tie for last for the end of round goal, so that's going to give me another 0, which is unfortunate, but also understandable considering that there's not really much I can do to play more birds or get more eggs, because, you know, I don't really have the grassland power. I don't even think I've used the grassland power so far. I'm pretty sure I've only used the eggs from the chipping sparrow. First turn in round number 5, I'm going to grab food. I decide to just simply leave the wheat in the bird feeder rather than risk not getting a wheat next time, so that I can tuck it on the blue jay. Here I'm going to go ahead and repeat the Grackle so that I can tuck a couple more cards from my hand. That's going to get a cache. The tuck will be successful for Barred Owl, and I will lay eggs pretty much exclusively on my wetland birds because that's the end of round goal. I actually just got 2 cards from my enemies from using the what's it called? The canvasback. I'm using the canvasback and one other duck card to everyone draw one. And that actually saves me because it finally gives me some room to use my Grackle without having to use the wetland power again. So I'm able to play my Trumpeter Swan. Now I have 5 cards in my wetland, 5 cards in my forest. I'm not going to play any more cards because no cards can go in my grassland. So my next 3 turns are simply going to be tucking each of these 3 cards and then using my catbird to lay an egg on all the birds in my wetlands, and that will pretty much round out the game. I am just going to be tucking the cards in my hand and caching any wheat from the bird feeder and laying eggs on the wetland birds. Alright, so we see the end of round goals. Unfortunately, I lost the 4th one too. So I really did not get a lot of points from the end of round goals. They got stolen by the CPUs, but that's okay. Let's see how many points we got regardless of that. All of the bird totals, we got 47. We got 4 from my bonus cards of having predators. I had 5 end of round goal points, which definitely should have been more. Red cleaned me out with that. I only had 12 eggs because no grassland. My food on the cards was 9, and I had so many tucked cards that I was able to finish out with 94 points, which definitely could have been 100 if the CPUs were a little bit nicer with getting the end of round goals. But let's go ahead and see this overview. As you can see, there are no cards in my grassland whatsoever. I don't even think I used the power at all. I did not choose to lay eggs at any point during the game unless it was from the chipping sparrow or the grackle or the blackbird. So yeah, that is it. That is the whole challenge for me. This was a lot of fun to do because I love experimenting with other forms of grabbing points, and honestly, getting 93 points is more points than I get sometimes when I play with my friends. You know, sometimes I'll only get 90 or even 80 or 70 something points. So I am pretty happy with this result. Unfortunately, it does seem very centralized around having some sort of bird in the forest or the wetland that can lay eggs, but in general, that's not a horrible thing because there are a lot of birds that can do that. So if you are in the situation where you feel like you really need to try something different, this is a good strategy in order to get a lot of reliable points. Until next time, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next challenge.